Namu Myoho Renge Kyo. Namu Myoho Renge Kyo. Namu Myoho Renge Kyo. Welcome, wonderful friends. Welcome to this wonderful life. The weather is shining. The northern light is starting to stream in here, and I'm struggling with my light adjustment to get something that looks reasonable and doesn't leave my face in the dark for you. All right, let's get into the Lankavatara. I hope this video finds you in good health and secure. Haven't said that in a while, have I? I think it nonetheless, always. Thank you for your practice. Thank you for being here. Thank you for subscribing. Thank you for all your efforts in your practice, your Buddha-ness. And to the patrons who continue to support this channel, we all are super grateful for your involvement. Yeah, thank you, patrons. Part 37. Further, Mahamati, there are 4 kinds of dhyanas. What are the 4s? Dhyanas, just as a reminder, can be translated as concentrations, contemplations, more loosely meditations. But as Lotus Sutra practitioners, you know, we do a what I call an active meditation because we invoke our Buddha-ness. But meditation in general is just a cerebration, the use of our mind to contemplate with some profundity ideas, teachings of Buddhism. So, there are 4 kinds that Shakyamuni is going to elucidate in the Lankavatara. The first is the dhyana practiced by the ignorant. These are people who don't know Buddhahood or don't know the object or the goal of Buddha-ness. They don't understand all of that, but they're involved in simply cerebrating about the nature of their lives. Number 2 is the dhyana devoted to the examination of meaning, which now is directly about the teachings and trying to sift through the words and the language and the expedient means to find meaning, applicable meaning to their own experiences of life. Yes? The third dhyana is with tathata, or suchness, for its object. So that cerebration, that contemplation, that concentration would be on understanding the true nature of all phenomena as a suchness, a kind of energy, a kind of being, a kind of potential manifestations, rather than solid born objects, rather witnessing a process, right? And the fourth, the dhyana of the Tathagatas, which would then be the experience of that process without making permanent, owning, grasping. So, of course, whenever Shakyamuni in the Lankavatara anyway, and usually formally throughout the sutras, when a concept is given, then an alliteration on that concept follows. So here we go. What is meant by the dhyana practiced by the ignorant? It is the one resorted to by the practicers exercising themselves in the discipline of the Shravakas and Pratyagabuddhas. They're just concentrated on. It's interesting that we give the names have been giving, and we talk in modern day of the realms, the 10 realms, the 10 worldly realms, yes, of hell, hunger, animality, anger, nin, learning and realization, and bodhisattva, all of them. And the Shravakas and Pratyagabuddhas are equated with the world of learning and the world of realization. All of this has to do with, if you look further into the translations, into hearing, the capacity to hear the words of Shakyamuni or the Buddha-ness, and secondly, the realization to penetrate, to accept, to inculcate those teachings well memorized and put them into action in daily life. Yeah, but it's an intellectual exercise. This is why the conversation is a lot about philosophers, because they haven't progressed beyond that ego state of understanding. They're memorizing, they're reading, they're listening, they're taking to heart, but they're still doing it as an entity, as a self, right? And so he's identifying these Shravakas and Pratyagabuddhas as ignorant. So in this case, they're not ignorant of Buddhism. They're not ignorant of Buddhahood as a teaching, but they are ignorant of Buddhahood as a reality, a mind state. The potential for that mind state in a self without ego, egolessness. That's a bridge too far. They can't. I wanted to use inculcate, but they can't seem to let go enough of their selfness, their ego-ness, their relation to things, their identification enough to allow themselves to be at one with the entire process. Yes? So I'll start the sentence over. It is one, the first dhyana is resorted to by he keeps using the word yogins, but the practitioners exercising themselves in the discipline of the Shravakas and Pratyagabuddhas, who, perceiving that there is no ego substance, that things are characterized with individuality and generality, that the body is a shadow and a skeleton which is transient, full of suffering and is impure, persistently cling to these notions which are regarded as just so and not otherwise, and who, starting from them, successively advance until they reach the cessation where there are no thoughts. This is called the dhyana practice by the ignorant. So we hear it in so many places, outside and inside of sects and groups of Buddhism, and outside of Buddhism, right? The Yogacara, these other schools, New Age schools, what have you, that are totally committed to ceasing thought. And you have it right here from Shakyamuni's lips. The idea of ceasing, as though the very effort of realizing this process, they commit to ending cessation of thought. That's ignorant. That you don't understand. You don't understand the teachings. You don't understand Buddhahood or Buddhism. You're trying to cease the functions of mind. And as I've told you time and time again, Buddhahood is only available, attainable, experienceable with the mind. So how in the hell are you going to attain Buddhahood if your whole objective in practice is to stop the mind functioning? So obviously that's ignorant. Mahamati, what then is the dhyana devoted to the examination of meaning? The second dhyana, or dhyana. It is the one practiced by those who, having gone beyond the egolessness of things, individuality and generality, the untenability of such ideas as self, other, and both, which are held by the philosophers, proceed to examine and follow up the meaning of the various aspects of the egolessness of things and the stages of bodhisattvahood. This is the dhyana devoted to the examination of meaning. How do we carry out this life, our minds, with this knowledge, with this understanding? How do we course the world through a constant awareness that everything is momentary and that we experience the potential in manifestation, and that dissolves any idea of ownership or ego, that we're simply participants in this process who can witness and observe it? How amazing is that? How do we course through our lives maintaining that objective focus, right? The third one, what Mahamati, is the dhyana with tathata for its object. When the practitioner recognizes that the discrimination of the two forms of egolessness is mere imagination, right? We talked about the two forms of egolessness previously. And that where he establishes himself in the reality of suchness, establishes himself in the reality of such, realizing that there can be no ego or self or I or mine, because I too am an instantiation moment to moment of this life. It's the same process that produces all of the stuff. I too am stuff, moment to moment being, right? There is no rising of discrimination. I don't have to identify with everything because I too am a thing, a manifestation, unpermanent, an example of the process which has this emergent property that can observe that very process. I call it the dhyana with tathata for its object, understanding that all is suchness with all the attendant factors and characteristics, right? This has already been taught. You can look that up on the threefoldlotus.com. What Mahamati then is the dhyana of the Tathagata? When the practitioner entering upon the stage of Tathagatahood and abiding in the triple bliss which characterizes self-realization attained by noble wisdom, right? The three bodies of Buddha, right? Accommodative, dharma, and reward, that triple aspect of awakening, devotes himself for the sake of all beings to the accomplishment of incomprehensible works. I call this the dhyana of Tathagatas, Therefore it is said, and now he's going to go into verse. So he's basically describing bodhisattvaness. Yes? How do we do that? There are the dhyana for the examination of meaning, the dhyana practiced by the ignorant, the dhyana with tathata for its object, and the pure dhyana of the Tathagata. The practitioner, while in his exercise, sees the form of the sun or the moon, or something looking like a lotus, or the underworld, or various forms like sky, fire, etc. All these appearances, manifestations, lead him to the way of the philosophers. They throw him down into the state of Shravakahood, into the realm of the Pratyeka Buddhas. When all these are tossed aside and there is a state of imagelessness, then a condition of in conformity with tathata presents itself. And the Buddhas will come together from all their countries with their shining hands, will stroke the head of this benefactor. So these are all colorful words talking about this sense of releasing the clinging and grasping of thingness and simply being. In that there is an awareness of the entirety of the process rather than the separate manifestations of the process. It's no longer necessary to identify every little grain of existence, to simply experiencing the process or processing. At that time, Mahamati, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, again said to the emancipated one, "Okay, Mahamati, you speak of nirvana. What is meant by this term nirvana?" I heard a lot of your ears picking up there. Shakyamuni responds, when the self-nature and the habit energy of all the Vijnanas, including the alaya, manas and manovijnana, from which issues the habit energy of wrong speculations, when all these go through a revulsion, I and all the Buddhas declare that there is nirvana, and the way and the self-nature of this nirvana is emptiness, which is the state of reality. What does that mean? He's first of all, when the self-nature and habit energy of all the Vijnanas, including the alaya, what he's identifying there, for sake of expedient means, is our karmic repository. And what is the karmic repository? How is it constructed? What is it made of? Energy with work. Energy with action. In that formulation, there is tendency and there are conditions. Every action has tendencies and conditions. There are tendencies and conditions to the actions. It's like a little ball of fire, huh? And from that potential issues forth myriad, endless variations of tendencies and conditions. So when he says, when the self-nature, that perception of thingness, the manifestation, and the habit energy of the Vijnanas, this continual process that compounds itself and amalgamates and, right, the formations, when all of that, from which issue the habit energy of wrong speculations, the wrong speculations are the mental identification of what that process is doing, hanging on to, possessing different little manifestations and identifying itself, the mind itself, with those identifications. This is what he's labeling the wrong speculations. When all those go through a revulsion, when you finally get rid of your attachment to those things as the real, like they exist permanently, statically, in and of your perception of them, I and all the Buddhas declare that there is nirvana. So Buddha-ness is washed of all of that clinging. It's simply relieved, emancipated from, liberated. It's all there, but it's not clung to. And the way and the self-nature of this nirvana, if you want to identify what that enlightenment is, what is that awakening specifically? Again, the problem of identifying yet another thing. Well, you can't grasp it. It's not an organ. It's not something you can pull out of the air. It's something. It's an experience of perception, of the mind, of awareness. You can't grab that. You can only experience that. And then the next question is, how do I continue to experience that, right? Because that in itself is the actual reality of life, the universe, and everything in it. That it's a process happening like sparks from a sparkler. They're moment-to-moment instantiations of potential, not something to be held, possessed, grabbed, or thrown out. It's all just happening, yes? Further, Mahamati, nirvana is the realm of self-realization attained by noble wisdom, which is free from the discrimination of eternality and annihilation. So that's a key point. To those who would say, well, that is an annihilation of reality, he says, no. Your idea of annihilation or eternality, are both a duality clung to by ego, trying to place things and possessions. No. This is just an ongoing process. Just be in it. Stop trying to hang on to a past, which is robbing you of the now, or trying to apply it to some imaginary future that can only be experienced as it happens. It's free from existence and non-existence, because those are past, future. They're meaningless statements. How is it not eternality? Because it has cast off the discrimination of individuality and generality. It is not internal. How is it not being annihilation? It is because all the wise men of the past, present, and future have attained realization. Therefore, it is not annihilation. If you annihilate it, then there's nothing to keep the practice going. There's no emancipation available if everything is annihilated. It makes no sense. You've annihilated something which is no longer existing because the process is moving on. It's a momentum. And the moment you focus in on a thing to annihilate it, you're living in the past. It's not here, now. Again, Mahamadi, the great parinirvana, is neither destruction nor death. Mahamadi, if the great parinirvana is death, then it will be a birth and a continuation. If it is destruction, then it will assume the character of an effect-producing deed. For this reason, Mahamadi, the great parinirvana is neither destruction nor death. Neither has it anything to do with vanishing. It is the goal of the practitioners. Again, Mahamadi, the great parinirvana is neither abandonment nor attainment. Neither is it one of the meaning nor of no meaning. This is said to be nirvana. And this is the slipperiness of words right here, because you'll notice he says it's not abandonment or attainment. And yet we use the word attainment all the time to talk about Buddhahood. But it's important to realize what he's saying here is you don't attain something you already have. So the use of attainment, it's a slippery word. What we're trying to say there is the awakening, really, the realization of this facility. It's always been there in our sentient mind. We've always been able to see the process at work, albeit heaped on top of by our constant grasping and attachment, our permanentizing of things. And we obfuscate what we already know, that we're momentum moving through a process, right? Neither is it one of meaning nor of no meaning. This is said to be nirvana. What happens is the discriminations end. And now you're just being in the process. Words like at one with, or as we often say, equanimity. Not a dissolution of everything, not a denial of everything, a realization of being with, moment to moment, everything, which doesn't require attachments, bringing along, possession, all of that. Stress comes from trying to maintain things that are empty, no longer exist. No wonder we're stressed, right? Further, Mahamadi, nirvana, conceived by the Shravakas and Pratyekabuddhas, consists in recognizing individuality and generality, in escaping social intercourse, in not having a perverted view of the world, and not raising discrimination. This is their notion of nirvana. But that notion of nirvana is firmly rooted in self. Do you see? Removing yourself from society to be a hermit monk won't lead you to Buddhahood, or very, very, very unlikely will you experience Buddhahood. And yet, there's a certain earthly, physical separation from all of the things that would capture your attention if you isolate yourself, but you're not living as your full potential. So it's a feeble attempt at enlightenment. Although you may learn a lot from it, you're cutting yourself off by not being able to experience those same insights along with other sentient minds. This is the Bodhisattva path. Being in a cave is the Hinayana path. Right? The Shravaka Pratyeka Buddha path is an isolationist. It's a first step in understanding. It's not the goal of Buddhism. Again, that division is always hammered on here. Well, not just here, obviously. Further, Mahamati, there are two kinds of characteristic signs of self-nature. What are these two kinds? They are the attachment to words as having a self-nature, right? The word blue, we think of it mentally as something that's a label for something that truly exists. When the truth of the matter is, the blue is some sound that we make, and we assign certain characteristics to it. And so the word is a construct and a linguistic tool of identification. But they are attachment to words as having a self-nature, and the attachment to objects as having a self-nature. Because if that painting is blue, do you understand the folly in that? The painting isn't something we can identify. It's a mental process, isn't it? Oh, but Sylvain, it's the paint on the canvas and the colors. No. The paint on the canvas and the colors are those things. But the painting is your experience of those other things. And to say that that painting, your impression of those other things, of that landscape, is that it is a landscape. You know, who's that? Come on, brain. Magritte. If you know any art history, Magritte made a painting of a smoking pipe. And right underneath the smoking pipe, he put in the words, "Ceci ce n'est pas une pipe." This is not a pipe. He was talking directly to this. Well, what do you mean? That's a pipe? No. Okay, well, it's a painting of a pipe. No. Well, I see a pipe. Good for you. This painting is a painting. It's a bunch of paint on a canvas, a support. And there's some representation of forms with colors. And they seem to represent an idea, a thing, something other than the painting, which we conventionally label and give the word pipe to. But that's all happening in your mind. It's not here in the painting, the image. Mahamati, where's this having? This takes place owing to one's clinging to the habit energy of words and false imaginings since beginningless time. We've always done this. In our identification of things, we make them so by giving them labels to further compound our thingifying of things, our identification. And the attachment to objects as having self-nature, Mahamati, takes place from not knowing that the external world is no more than self-mind. Because everything is experience. Everything is your witnessing of it happening moment to moment. Keeps coming back to that. And it's not a conventional way of thinking, is it? And yet you can't deny that it's absolutely accurate. But being in that state of mind, that perspective shift, that experience of life, that's something we're not accustomed to. But if we can become accustomed to it, we will observe life far differently, far removed from our collection of identifications, yes? Further, Mahamati, there are two kinds of the sustaining power which issues from the Tathagatas, who are fully enlightened ones, and sustained by this power, the Bodhisattvas would prostrate themselves at their feet and ask them questions. What is this twofold power that sustains the Bodhisattvas? How do you keep this up? How do you keep your mind focused on the real state of affairs rather than our habit energy of identification, yeah? The one is the power by which they are sustained to go through the samadhis and samapatis, while the other is the power whereby the Buddhas manifest themselves in person before the Bodhisattvas and baptize them with their own hands. Oh, man, the westernization of this text is really troublesome to me, but we'll go on. Then Mahamati, sustained by the power of the Buddhas. What is the power of the Buddhas? Any idea? This isn't a supreme court of Buddhas handing down decisions on you. The power of the Buddhas is the Buddha, your experience, your moment-to-moment awakeness is the power of the Buddhas. It's your Buddha-ness influencing your perceptions moment to moment. That's what that means. The Bodhisattva Mahasattvas at their first stage will attain the Bodhisattva Samadhi known as the light of Mahayana, which belongs to the Bodhisattva Mahasattvas. They will immediately see the Tathagatas, fully enlightened ones, appearing before them personally, who come from all the different abodes in the 10 quarters of the world, and who now, facing the Bodhisattvas, will impart to them their sustaining power displayed with body, mouth, and words. This is our practice. Again, this isn't a group of cowboys on horseback arriving to direct your... This is your mental experience. Remember, this is how the sutras are written. They're stories of mental functionings. Mahamati, as is the case with the Vajragarbha, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, and the other with other Bodhisattva Mahasattvas who are in possession of similar character, virtue, so Mahamati, with the Bodhisattva Mahasattvas at the first stage, they will attain the Tathagatas' power, sustaining them in their samadhis and samapatis. And this is what we do in Lotus Sutra Buddhism, invoking Buddhahood with our minds to witness it. This is why it's awakening to the true state of all phenomena, the process of life. By virtue of their stock of merit accumulated for 100,000 kalpas, they will successively going up the stages and getting thoroughly acquainted with what they should do and should not do, finally reach the stages of bodhisattvahood called the Dharmamega. Here the Bodhisattva Mahasattva finds himself seated on a throne in the Lotus Palace and surrounded by the Bodhisattva Mahasattvas of similar class, a tiara decorated and ornamented with all kinds of precious stones on his head and his body, shines brilliantly like the moon in a yellowish gold color of the Kampaka flower. The Buddhas now come from their worlds in the 10 quarters, and with their lotus-like hands sprinkle the forehead of the Bodhisattva Mahasattvas, who is seated on the throne in the Lotus Palace. The Buddhas thus give him a baptism, an initiation, let's call it. Baptism. Personally by hand, as when a great king invested with supreme authority initiates his crown prince. This bodhisattva with these bodhisattvas are said to be sustained by the Buddha's power, being thus Mahamati. This is the twofold sustaining power imparted to the Bodhisattva Mahasattvas, who, sustained by this twofold sustaining power, personally come into the presence of all the Buddhas. In no other way are there Tathagatas, fully enlightened ones, to be interviewed. So, you have to take into account the people he's talking to. But I can't help but wonder, first of all, if this translation is capturing this accurately, but if this is the way the teaching is worded at the point of the Mahayana where the Lankavatara Sutra takes place, it's impossible for me to judge, but it would seem that this indulgence into the storytelling of these personages, which we see throughout the sutras, has very much the danger of inculcating the very same attachments to these personages as these mendicants, these physicians of the mind, who will somehow appear to us to lead the way. It's not clear that this is a self-practice. It's not clear that these bodhisattvas and these Buddhas that come to initiate our enlightenment are of our own mind. And this is the critical point that the Lankavatara continuously tries to make. And yet, in this verbiage, we can get a little lost. Do you see it? So I'm identifying that problem, but I'm also wanting you to understand that when we read these translations as is, we need to continuously be aware of what is the point, what is the meaning, what is this story making obvious. And we can't divorce ourselves from the audience at the time. We are not that audience. We are the audience in the Lotus Sutra. In the Lotus Sutra, this kind of verbiage is the verbiage in the Lotus Sutra, though it's still colorful and has personages, it's far more honed in. It's very specific. This is a little bit cloudy, but it's an earlier teaching, so okay, right? Further, Mahamati, whatever samadhis, psychic faculties, and teachings are exhibited by the Bodhisattvas Mahasattvas, they are sustained by the twofold sustaining power of the Buddhas. What is that? The inspiration, the goal, the attainment of Buddhahood is what keeps driving us in our practice, obviously, right? So that's what that means. The power of the Buddhas is our mental faculty to witness, to observe, to experience this awakening, this enlightenment, this equanimity. If Mahamati, the Bodhisattva Mahasattvas, show their eloquence without the Buddha's sustaining power, the ignorant and simple-minded will also show their eloquence. In other words, we won't be any different. We'll all be competing egos trying to establish supremacy over each other. But the latter do not. Why? Because of the sustaining power on the one hand and its absence on the other. Where the Tathagatas enter with their sustaining power, there will be music not only in various musical instruments and vessels, but also even in grass, shrubs, trees, and mountains. Mahamati, yes. In towns indeed, palaces, houses, and royal abodes. How much more those endowed with sentiency? The mute, blind, and deaf will be cured of their deficiencies, Mahamati, and will enjoy their emancipation. Because the characteristics of those ailments won't stand in the way of their enlightenment. That's what that means. They won't magically walk out of a hole and hear and see everything. That's not what that means. Understanding the true nature of all phenomena means that you're no longer adhered to the conditions made by attachment. Such, Mahamati, is the great, extraordinary virtue of the sustaining power imparted by the Tathagatas. Further, Mahamati said, why is it, emancipated one, that when the Bodhisattva Mahasattvas are established in the Samadhis and Samapatis, and when they are initiated at the most exalted stage, the Tathagatas, the fully enlightened ones, bestow their sustaining power on them? This is the very problem I identified moments ago. Mahamati can't unglue himself from envisioning these personages as an other bequeathing to him this liberation. He doesn't get it. He doesn't get that these personages are personages of mental function, that they're his own liberation within his own perceptive capacity. He's not getting it. And I sympathize with Mahamati a little bit because, like I just identified, this storytelling is lending itself to the problematic of attachment and the problem to begin with. It's not well stated. And as I continuously say, it's hard to tell whether that's in the sutra itself or the translations of the sutra. But because now Mahamati is asking this question, it would seem that there's evidence that, yeah, this is the way it was taught, words being mutable. So Shakyamuni responds, it is in order to make them avoid the evil ones, karma and passions, to keep them away from the dhyana and stage of the Shravakahood, to have them realize the stage of Tathagatahood, and to make them grow in the truth and experience already attained. Finally. So he's telling Mahamati, these Buddhas, these personages that bequeath upon you this certain enlightenment at this particular stage of your practice is your mentation, your mental faculty of penetrating wisdom, of understanding. You enlighten yourself, and not for any magical reason, but because the truth and experience already attained. This is a faculty of your mind you have, but you deny constantly because of your myriad distractions and attachments. I mean, he's spelling it out very clearly here. For this reason, Mahamati, the Tathagatas, fully enlightened ones, sustain with their power the Bodhisattva Mahasattvas. If you don't have it as a goal to awaken your Buddha nature, Buddha-ness, then why make all this effort? Why bother? Because you like just being ritualistic and playing at Buddhism? Don't you want to awaken your mind to this liberated experience of life? Hello? If they were not thus sustained, Mahamati, they would fall into the way of thinking and feeling as cherished by the wrong philosophers, Sarvakas, or evil ones, and they would not attain the highest enlightenment. For this reason, the Bodhisattva Mahasattvas are upheld by the Tathagatas, the fully enlightened ones. Thus is said, the sustaining power is purified by the Buddha's vows in the initiation, samadhis, etc. From the first to the 10th stage, the Bodhisattvas are in the embrace of the Buddhas. And so I'm going to end on that today. The next part is 51. That was a good one. I think we got to the root of the matter there. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. And while you're at it, if you've got any insights in any of this, please consider liking the video. And most of all, please subscribe. I don't care so much about the bell counter. I'm sure it affects the algorithms. You know, if you want to hit the bell icon so you're notified, I do these videos almost every day. So I don't know that you need a notification. If it helps this channel spread to more people so we can grow the Sangha, great. But, you know, my mission in this channel is to get more and more people practicing Buddhism correctly and to support my friends to practice, to keep practicing, to use whatever influence I have of my Buddha-ness to assuage your doubts and encourage your practice. That's all we're doing here, right? That's why the Sangha. And with a special thank you from all of us, those of you who are patrons, making donations either through Patreon or PayPal. You guys are amazing, Bodhisattvas. Thank you so much for that. And that's it. That's it for today. Please take care of your health. Be kind to yourself. And I'll see you in the next one. All right? Thanks again. Bye for now.